Welcome. This is the podcast series dedicated to living a revenue culture. Long-term business survival is about creating maximum profit, but you can only do that when you first optimize the people-first culture. And this podcast is dedicated twice a month to bringing you people who are exceptional at fighting that battle of how do we create a great culture and maximize our profits. Today, I'm thrilled to bring you Antarctic Mike. And if you're sitting at your computer and you actually go to LinkedIn and type in Antarctic Mike, you're absolutely going to find him. And if you want a last name, it's Pierce. But he got the Antarctic Mike, and I'm going to let him tell you the story. But back in 2006, he took 2 trips to Antarctica to run multiple marathons, including a 100K ultra marathon. Now, that sounds pretty heavy duty to me, but to prepare for that, he took 2 years preparing in a cold storage facility in San Diego to get ready for those marathons. Now, if you mention Antarctic Mike's name to probably 100,000 people, business leaders around the world, they will know exactly who you're talking about. They've heard him tell his story, but in addition to his story, he has so many learnings from the people he's had a chance to work with, all over the US and the world. So welcome, Mike.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me into your world today.
Well, the first thing you got to do is you got to tell people why, 2 trips to Antarctica, 3 marathons, and 2 years of cold storage.
Yeah, clearly all that stuff was labeled with big red letters that said, "Don't try this at home." No question about that. I agree with that. I became very interested in Antarctica when I ran into the Ernest Shackleton story in a bookstore by random chance in 2001. And for the viewers that don't know his story, the basic, real short version of the story was in 1914, he led a team of 27 people into Antarctica to do something nobody had ever done before, which was to cross the entire continent of Antarctica on foot, 1,800 miles. And when I first understood just that part of the story, I said to myself, I wish my boss was more like that guy. Because that guy, meaning Ernest Shackleton, had the character qualities of discipline and I think what it takes to be successful, trying things nobody's ever tried. I mean, i.e. solving problems nobody's ever solved, adding value nobody's ever added, creating experiences nobody's ever created. All of that, what I just said, went through my mind instinctively in the aisle of the bookstore on that random day in August of 2001. And that was the beginning of the rest of my life, little did I know.
Well, tell it, you and I talked about Shackleton before, and didn't they just find his ship?
Yes, on May 5th of this year, 2022, they actually found for the first time, not only found where the ship was, but they broadcasted video and photographic images of that ship, which currently sits in 10,000 feet of water off the coast of Antarctica. I mean, it's a miracle. We can even get a working device down to 10,000 feet with all the pressure and all the problems you have underwater. That we can even broadcast those images is really a miracle.
Well, for those who don't know the whole story, when you first told me the story, because you were the first one to tell me the whole story, some of the things about his story that just fascinated me, because we're talking about leadership and culture and in building a revenue culture. Share how he got his team, because to get a bunch of people to want to go to Antarctica and walk 1,000 miles, I mean, that to me sounds like he had to have something going.
Well, yes, how he brought this team together is a model for us today, to bring a better team of people together today, which ultimately ties to revenue. So we're going to tie this whole thing to revenue. So Shackleton had this idea, and of course, then he had to recruit his people. So he runs an ad in the newspaper in London, England, in August of 1914. And the ad said this: men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. And he signed it. That small little ad in the newspaper in London in 1914 created a response of more than 5,000 people who raised their hand with some level of interest. Now, of course, the $1 million question that circles back to us today in the real world is this: why did it work? Right? What was it about that story? It's a story. It's a very small story, but nonetheless, it's a story. What about that story made it so successful? And I think the answer is very obvious. I think that Shackleton was a brilliant storyteller, telling a story that really gave people an opportunity to make a difference and not just a living. He was affording people a chance to be a part of something bigger and more important than themselves. And I think when Shackleton put that story out in front of, the people in London, I think it caused people to look into the mirror and see a reflection of what they wanted their life to become like. Now, of course, for people who did not want their life to become like that, that's okay. Because at the same time, the story draws the people in that you want. And at the same time, it's a deterrent, right? To push away the people that either can't do that or don't want to do that, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with those people. It's just like putting the right shoe on the left foot, right? It's not the issue of a bad shoe. It's just the wrong foot. And so I think that that's a real model for us today, because ultimately in our businesses, we want to be successful. And of course, success is measured in a number of different ways. Revenue, obviously, being one of those ways that businesses' success is measured and engaged. And of course, to get that, right now, the $1 million question becomes, well, how do we do that? And I think the answer really largely lies in Shackleton's story. I really believe that, because how we tell our stories today makes a difference of who we draw in. And who we draw in, you can draw a straight line between the people you draw in and the revenue that you generate. I'll give you a good example. I'm going to take us to the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, there's a guy named Craig Poole. Poole spelled like the swimming pool with an E on the end. For the viewers that don't know Craig Poole, you should know him. Look him up on Facebook. Look him up on LinkedIn. He lives there. He's a very close friend of mine. Tell him I sent you. Okay, Craig Poole grows up in Pittsburgh, and he gets in the hotel business, and he becomes very successful. I mean, his real knack is turning around underperforming properties. And so in 2010, Craig's now about 60 years old, and he's made enough money that he really doesn't have to work. But he gets a phone call from somebody in the great metropolis, you ready for this, of Reading, Pennsylvania. Now, the caveat to what the story is this. For the viewers that don't know much about Reading, Reading, Pennsylvania is a very small town that sits close to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And Reading, Pennsylvania is the second poorest city in the United States, and it has the second highest crime rate of any city in the country. It's very fair to say that Reading, Pennsylvania is a very challenging place to live and do good business. Okay, so Craig gets this phone call from somebody at a Crown Plaza hotel in Reading. And this Crown Plaza was a sinking ship. I mean, this thing was terrible. And so Craig gets this phone call to come to Reading and turn it around. And he's kind of like, Reading, Pennsylvania? Like, are you kidding me? Like, why am I going to go to the hood, right? So they're like, look, Craig, we're not asking you to marry her today. We're just asking you to go on a date. Just come and check it out. All right, fine, I will. So Craig goes to Reading. He's never left. Craig goes to Reading and falls in love with the people and decides to take the challenge on. So he moves to Reading. And he spends 4 years in this Crown Plaza hotel with no capital infusion into the hotel. He completely turns it around. So it was very successful. So now it's 2014 and Craig's like, what am I going to do now? So he meets a guy named Albert Boscov, who would change the course of his whole life to come. Albert Boscov is an icon in central Pennsylvania. Many years ago, he started a series of department stores called Boscov's, and 39 stores generated more than $1 billion in revenue annually. That's pretty good, right? Yeah. So Albert becomes a real success and he's worth a lot of money. So Craig meets him in 2014. Albert Boscov is now in his 80s and he's dying of cancer, literally. And he meets Craig. Now, Albert's dream for his whole life is to turn the city of Reading around. He really wanted to make an impact on the city. So he meets Craig and they put their heads together and they decide, well, we have to put a magnet in Reading. We've got to put something in Reading that will draw people in, right? And so they decide, well, let's put a hotel in. I mean, Craig only knows hotels. I mean, really outside of hotels, he's not good for anything. So they decide they're going to put a hotel in Reading that will draw people in. So they raise the money. And in December of 2016, they opened the doors to a $67 million palace of a DoubleTree hotel right in the heart of Reading, Pennsylvania, literally adjacent to the Reading Railroad tracks, which are littered with heroin needles and used condoms. I have walked the railroad tracks in Reading. I have seen the needles and I've seen the used condoms firsthand. So they build this hotel there, right? And people are kind of like, you guys are out of your mind. They're almost scoffing at these people. Like, how is this going to work? There's no way anybody's going to spend the money to come to the hood in Reading, right? Craig's like, just watch and see. So now Craig's got to staff up the hotel. So to go get the staff for the hotel, he literally goes to the streets of Reading, literally. He starts walking the streets in the hood and starts talking to people. Here was Craig's criteria to be considered as a candidate to work at the hotel. You either had to, 1, walk to work, or 2, you came from prison. And I don't mean parking tickets and DUIs. I mean hardcore felony prisoners who did their time and who now need a second chance, who need somebody to stand behind them. So Craig goes and hires these people. And he opens the doors in December of 2016. So the years 2017, 18, and 19 now go by. For 3 consecutive years, the DoubleTree Hotel in Reading, Pennsylvania wins the Conrad Hilton Award. The Conrad Hilton Award is the highest award that Hilton Hotels gives to any of their properties worldwide. And to this day, the DoubleTree Hotel in Reading, Pennsylvania, sitting adjacent to the Reading Railroad tracks, littered with heroin needles and condoms, is the highest performing DoubleTree hotel on earth. And the only reason they didn't win the award in 2020 and 21 is because due to the coronavirus, Hilton didn't give it out because it was an anomaly of a couple of years. So they didn't give the award. But if they had, they would have won it. Their numbers were stronger than anybody's in the world. And this gets the attention. I mean, we're talking, this property is higher performing than the beachfront properties in West Palm Beach, Florida, Honolulu, Hawaii, and higher performing than the classic hotel property sitting on the shores of Lake Michigan in Chicago called the Wit. The Wit is a very famous hotel in Chicago that's now a DoubleTree. And this story gets the attention of a kid who works at the Wit. He's a 23-year-old kid named Kyle Allison. Kyle works at the Wit. And Kyle's thinking to himself, how is our property, this classic, restored, historic building of a property sitting on the shores of Lake Michigan, how are we losing to somebody in Reading, Pennsylvania? So he decides to investigate. So he drives his car from Chicago to Reading and he introduces himself to Craig. And he says, look, I'd like to work here. I'd like to understand and see the story firsthand. So Craig says, of course, I'll put you to work. So he gives him a job and he goes to work. Now he starts conversing with his coworkers there at the hotel in Reading, and he's fascinated by the conversations he's having with these people. He's like, these people are so engaged in what they do. These people think and act like owners. Like, how is this even possible? So he's so moved by these conversations, he decides to record them on a video camera. But here's the thing. Kyle is not exactly a videographer. He's got one of these video cameras that look, one of these cheese ball video cameras that look like it came free in a cereal box, right? Those kind of video cameras. Yep. But nonetheless, it worked. So now he's recording all these stories, and he decides, you know what? We actually have a really impactful big story here. So let's put all the little stories together. So he finds a friend of his who's a college student, and they kind of MacGyver all the stories together. And they decide, we're going to enter this story, this film, in the Reading Film Festival. So last year, they entered the story titled, Follow Me and I'll Be Behind You. They enter this in the Reading Film Festival. It wins. Like, it won, it beat all the other films. Like, this is a pretty big deal. Now the story is permeating, and that story is actually going to be released to the public later this month in April of 22. And, you look at the story, and all their revenue numbers that every hotel would just dream of are really great numbers. Why? Because he's got these people that he's standing behind. The title of the film is Follow Me and I'll Be Behind You. And it's a great story of leadership. It's a great story of saying, you know what? You've got to be worthy of being followed. You got to give people a reason to follow you. They're not going to follow you just to follow you. You got to give them a reason. Well, when they follow you, where are you taking them to? Where are you leading them to, right? What does it really mean to lead people? Then what does it mean to stand behind them? Yep. Craig Poole stands behind people like you cannot believe. I'll give you an example from last week. So I'm talking to Craig, and one of the things that's happened this year that's really challenging for a lot of his people, okay, picture hotel workers. They don't have glamorous jobs, and they don't make a lot of money. And so a lot of his people are really challenged because a lot of the rents where they live in their apartments and stuff have gone sky high because, property values have gone through the roof and rents have followed. And so what happens is a number of his employees have actually been displaced out of their apartments because the landlord decided to sell the building because of the windfall in the upside of the property value. So they want to cash out. So now they give them a 30-day notice. So there's a young lady by the name of Jenny. I have yet to meet Jenny. I'm going to the hotel in Reading on April 16th. I'm going in 2 weeks to the hotel to spend a few days with them. But I'm going to meet this lady, Jenny. So Jenny's a hotel worker. And Jenny works, I don't know, as a banquet server, not a glamorous job. And she's out of her house. She literally is out of her house. So Craig does this. Craig says, number one, we're going to stand behind you, Jenny. He moves her into the hotel. So she moves into the hotel with 2 kids. So now she doesn't have to worry about a roof over her head. Obviously, this is not a long-term solution. So Craig starts to go to work to help these people buy a condo or a house so that they'll never have to have a rent increase again, right? Because if they get a 30-year mortgage, right, they have a steady payment forever. So now he goes to work to help Jenny get all this together. And Craig gets a phone call from somebody at the mortgage company. And the conversation sounds like this. Craig, Jenny is pretty much ready to go with the mortgage. There's only one problem. Craig goes, what's the problem? She doesn't make enough money. Craig's answer, how much is she short? The guy says, $5,000 a year. Here's his response in the moment without even thinking. Effective immediately, Jenny has a $5,000 pay increase. Are we good to go? Like, Craig didn't call the CFO. He didn't call the president. He didn't petition the Pope. You know how normally if you're going to do this for somebody, man, you got to go through 19 steps and have a strategic planning meeting and mark out all the KPIs and all this other stuff. No, none of that stuff. Nope. Effective immediately, she has a raise. He gets off the phone with the banking guy. He calls HR and he says, effective right now, Jenny has a $5,000 increase. Jenny is going to close on a house within a month. I mean, that's an example of standing behind his people. and just trusting that if I stand behind them, meaning, you know what, the decisions that I make are going to be in their best interest first before mine, before the hotels. He doesn't know the impact on the hotel, but here's what he does know. If I give enough of these people what they really need, you know what, I'll get more than enough of what I need in return. And I think this is partly why this hotel, sitting in the challenging environment of Reading, Pennsylvania, is such a magnet, and people are flocking to the hotel spending money because it's an example. I almost think that the way Craig treats these people is an example of how other people want to be treated and how I think ultimately they want to treat their people. And it's such a magnet. It's drawn people in, and they're spending money like in record amounts. I mean, they wouldn't have won this award had not people come with wheelbarrows full of money. But it's very counterintuitive. I mean, it's very counterintuitive because the way they got to the revenue was very different than what most people do.
Yep. You know, when you and I talked the other day, you gave me something that I want to give back to our listeners, our viewers. And the story, Craig's story, is so apropos. You know, you gave me because you and I talked about this, and you know, we talked about, well, do you make the customers first or do you make the employees first? And what you said was, it's always about other people first.
Right.
And, you know, when you think about it that way, then everybody in the equation, when we talk about a revenue culture, we include the stakeholders and the leadership and all the employees, but also all our business partners, all our ideal customers in our community.
Yeah.
And if all of the players in that always think the other person first, what an incredible outcome you get.
I mean, you know, it's funny because as people who are customers, right? We are consumers too, right? You and I are consumers, and all the viewers here are consumers. Think about this. You will drive further and you will spend more money when you really like the business in question. You will.
Yep.
When that business really puts other people first, you will drive further and spend more money. I mean, I'm an example of that. Okay.
Yep.
I fly Delta Airlines. Now, for the record, I am not a paid sponsor for Delta. My dad does not work there. I do not own a piece of stock in the company, and I've never met Ed Bestian, the CEO of the company, although he's on my bucket list. I am a customer of Delta for one reason, and one reason only. I noticed years ago, they go so far out of their way to say thank you to their customer. I mean, they really do put the customer first. And it's funny because a lot of companies will say that. They'll print it on the brochure, the websites, the business card, the toilet paper, right? They'll put it on all the stuff. But it's just hyperbole. It's just hot air. It's just words, right? But yet when I saw the stories, the actual real stories of what these Delta people were doing differently than anybody at any other airline, I said, that's my airline, period. And now when I book my trips, I just booked a whole bunch of them today. I've got like 10 flights on Delta coming up in the next couple of months. You know, Pam, this lady that books all my trips, she's got my credit card number. I just call her and I say, I got to go here to here to here to here to here to here. And it's on Delta. Go. Like she doesn't even know. I don't even know the number, Rick, literally. Right. I literally have 10 Delta flights that are booked right now. I have no idea what those cost. No idea. And it's on my credit card. But you know what? I don't care because I've already made the decision. They are my airline. That's it. They're my airline. Now, I know from, you know, historically, I know if I look at airlines, they're all pretty much the same price in the end. I mean, maybe it's $10 more on this trip, 10 less on the next one. But in the end, they're all pretty much the same, right? But in the end, even if it's more, I don't even care because I want to give my business to people who really do go out of their way and put somebody else other than themselves first. And I saw that at Delta. And that's the only reason why I did this. It has nothing to do with safety and on-time performance and any other factor. It has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
And I got to believe most customers are that way.
Well, you know, as you told both of the stories, first the Shackleton story and then the Craig Poole story, the underlying power in that is both of those leaders had a purpose way beyond, you know, the making money or the tactical execution. Yep. And it required all the people to be part of it. and they
Right.
build an organization accordingly.
And the money comes.
Absolutely.
The money
Well,
is it's a byproduct.
yes.
It's a natural byproduct of putting these people first.
Well,
Because when you put them first, they think and act like owners. They take ownership in their job. And taking ownership in the job is what gives the customer a reason to drive further and spend more money.
well, and a CEO is, what do they want? Well, they want their people to be innovative, and they want to have good customer interface, and they want them to, be operationally excellent. Well, who does that? The people do it. The CEO doesn't do it in a boardroom drawing pictures. It's the humans in your organization, and they need to be committed to the same purpose that the CEO is committed to.
And here's the other catch. Those people in question, the rank and file employees, right, who really do the work, they actually have to want to do that.
Oh,
you see,
yeah.
the leaders, and I preach this to CEOs, the leaders cannot like them, pay them, or threaten them enough. I mean, you can like somebody, pay them, and threaten them, and that'll take them so far. That'll get us to what I call the required effort of the job. Okay, and if we just get to the required effort, yeah, we can probably stay in business. But you know what? We're never going to be world-class, attracting people that will drive further and spend more money if we only get to the required level of effort. We got to get to what I call the discretionary level of effort. And the only way to get people to the discretionary level of effort is for them to actually want to do that. So now, of course, the million-dollar question is, what can the leader, i.e. the CEO or the people in charge, what can they do to really trigger, to be the catalyst, as I call it, the catalyst who triggers that desire within each of their people individually and collectively? That's the trick of being a leader.
Yep.
And when you put people first, it's obvious that people can, and they know when there's genuineness, right? You can't have strings attached. No strings attached, as I say. No strings attached.
The world is transparent. And, you can say one thing, but people are going to watch what you do.
Oh, yeah. And if you got a string attached to something that you want, or there's a condition on it, they won't do it.
So, I don't want us to run out of time, and I want you to finish the Shackleton story, because we jump from the ad to the ship's 10,000 feet under the ocean. Does that mean everybody died?
No, what happened was, when that ship got stranded in the ice, and then they got off the ship, they pulled supplies and life rafts and stuff off the ship, because they knew eventually the ship was going to get crushed by the weight of the ice and the pressure of the ice, right? Yep. So in 1915, that ice collapsed in on the ship, and it crushed it, and it sunk, where it's been sitting for more than 100 years. And so the 28 men are out on the ice floes, literally drifting aimlessly in the Weddell Sea. Well, Shackleton, thanks to his leadership, inspired those 27 people to keep moving forward no matter what. And eventually, all 28 of those men came home alive. Shackleton brought all of them home. Not a single person died in that whole expedition. And that's a big part of the reason why the story is fairly well known and so attractive to people, because it's kind of got a romantic ending, right, in that everybody lived.
Yeah.
And of course, when you look at, well, what did Shackleton do or not do that really got those people in that want to zone of really wanting to be great and wanting to keep going forward no matter what? We could talk for days on those characteristics that he implemented into that culture, and how those characteristics that he implemented into that culture in 1914 through 1916 are completely the same characteristics that it takes to implement into that business I'm looking at, and that one, and that one, and that one today. It's no different. It's just a different time, and it's a different setting.
Yep. And they each need their own story.
They all do. And the irony is, they all have great stories right now. They're just not aware of them, and they're not telling the world what those stories are.
Yeah. Say a little more about that, because that's one of the things you're a master at, is helping people both identify and then become confident enough to tell their story. What do you say to CEOs about how to do that?
Well, I start by asking them a question. Okay, why would I pick you? right? Whether I'm going to work for you as an employee or whether I'm going to buy from you as a customer. Why would I pick you? And of course, most people really, they give the wrong answer. The answer they give sounds like this. Well, we make a great widget. The quality of ingredients on our stuff is second to none. And we have customer service people who stay up all 168 hours in a week because they care so much and they never sleep. And we have a great culture and great benefits. And you can bring your dog to work and we have pizza every Friday. I mean, that's pretty much how it sounds, right?
Yep.
But that's not a reason for me to quit my job at that company across the street and come to work for you. That's not a reason for me as a customer to drive further and spend more money. No, I tell CEOs, you know what, when people are going to pick you, they're not picking your stuff. They're picking you per se. And they're picking the people that are joined to you that are behind this curtain called ABC Company or whatever the name of the company is. So the question becomes, what are the stories that are going to tell the world about you as a person and you as a collective group of people that are going to be a compelling reason for me to quit my job as an engineer over there across the street at that company, or a truck driver, or a salesperson, or whatever role I play, and say, I want to be a part of that team, right? That's the question. And so I'll start digging and digging and digging and looking for the stories. And I can usually find it. I mean, if I have an average CEO in front of me, I can probably dig and find the story within about 10 or 15 minutes. It's not hard to do, just because I have a knack for it. And I know it. And I'm looking, when I dig for stories, I'm looking for stories that display character. Character is the most attractive part of a story.
Yep.
And I could give you examples from here to Hong Kong about this, but I mean, it's just, I'm looking for those kind of stories. And when you tell the world that kind of story, people go, huh? And that's the whole goal of a story. Just get people to lean in and say,
Yep.
wow, tell me more. Well, funny you ask.
Yeah.
That's why I tell CEOs, even though I'm the most unemployable, renegade, backward thinking cowboy, HR and compliance time bomb, I mean, that's really what I am. And you really don't want to hire me. I could sell your stuff like an Olympic champion, even though I can't spell the word water. Like, let's say I'm working for a plumbing company. I can't spell the word water, but I could sell the plumbing services of your company like a rock star if I could tell the story to enough people. Because I could tell the story, right? Assuming we have the right story, I could tell it to a lot of people. And then people go, oh, I don't know what a water pipe is. I don't know who that guy is, but I'll take 3 of them. Yep. Because they see something in the story that they like. And I almost think what they have to see is a reflection of what they want to be more like. That's why I say the story has to pass what I call the parent and the teacher test. Meaning this, if an average parent or an average teacher would see the story, would the response sound like this? If my kids, my students were half of that, they would be more than successful. Now you get those people telling your story to other people, right? Because when somebody sees a great story, they hit send. And they send and they send and they send and they send. Now you've got people, think about the power of this, Rick. Now you got people telling the world how great you are.
Yep.
They're not even a customer. They don't even live near you. They'll never invest in you. They'll never work for you. They'll never buy anything from you. But they're saying, I love these people. Send, 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 send. So if that's not marketing on steroids, I don't know what is.
Well, and it all comes from that place of serving others. So, you know, that's a great place. So tell me, we've got time for maybe a couple more questions here.
Okay.
Tell me what you see has changed since the pandemic. Do you see that, you know, employees, CEOs are different today than they were 2 years ago?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't necessarily think people are different. I think perspective is different. One of the things that I've noticed is people have a much greater sense of appreciation for being in person. I mean, it's kind of funny how you don't know how much something means to you until it's taken away. Yeah. And the fact that we could actually meet with people, was taken away from us, right? People were pretty much locked in the zoo cage for, better part of a couple of years. And so the fact that that was taken away, all of a sudden now, the virus has pretty much disappeared now, right? Pretty much now we're getting back, the planes are full, the hotels are full, the offices are full, right? Conferences are going on. And people have such a great appreciation for the fact that we can be there. The fact that we can literally and physically be 6 inches from the next guy and give them a hug and hug this lady and shake their hand and be right there in their presence. And I think we have a greater sense of appreciation for that. That's the biggest thing I noticed. But we didn't know that until it vanished from us.
Yeah, isn't that funny? So here's my last question for you. As you think about all the things all the people you've met, all the stories you've heard and told, what advice do you have for CEOs or owners who are either starting or running companies? What should they be thinking about and doing? And then the same question for those people coming up in their careers, and they're trying to figure out, how do I get to work someplace where I'm proud to be there every day and I'm enjoying what do I do? What advice do you have for those two groups?
Okay, let's take the first group, the owners of the companies that are trying to grow their businesses. My advice to them is, you've got to give people a compelling and a good reason to pick you. And the best way to do that is to develop a story, is to really figure out what story is going to speak the loudest, the clearest to the audience that I want to reach. I mean, that's number one. Give people a good reason to pick you. And then revenue and everything else you're looking for solves. I mean, it just comes. It's a byproduct, right? When people start picking you, the numbers will change. So that's my advice to the CEOs. Your second question was, of course,
it has to be a story they're actually living.
Oh, yeah, it's got to be a real story. Obviously, it has to be a real story from underneath the rooftop of your company. And ideally, it's a story of character. Yeah. It's a reflection of what people want to become more like. And that's not easy to do. I mean, if you have questions about that, call me. I'll try and help you figure it out. I mean, I'm a story junkie. I just listen to these all day long, and I love to help people. So that's my advice to the owners of the company. Now, your second question was, what's the advice to who? The employee that's kind of working their way up the ladder?
Yeah, it could be a new graduate, or it could be somebody 27, 28, they want to move up the career or find the right job. What advice do you have for them?
Okay. So are we making the assumption that they don't yet have a career path that they've started on?
They don't yet have some place where they say, boy, I'm glad I'm here.
Okay. What I would say is, you got to go where you think you can really make an impact and a difference, and not just a living. I mean, one of the things that I came to realize, it took me to age 40 to figure this out. So I'm going to help some of you try and figure it out before you get to 40. You got to land on some, you only have so much time, right? Time is like sand in the hourglass. There's only so much. Now, I'm not saying the sand is running out today, because clearly for younger people, they got a lot of sand left, but it's finite. Yeah. Therefore, you don't want to get to the end of the hourglass when there's not much sand left and say, ooh, I wish I'd done that, or I wish I had pursued that. You don't want to be that person in that position. I think it's very important, if you're going to really give your all and invest. I mean, think about this. Your investment of time in a career, you're investing the best awakening hours of your whole life. You're investing more important hours than you spend with your family, than you spend with your kids or your spouse, right? That's a big deal. Therefore, you better invest that time wisely. And I think the wisest way to invest the time is invest it in something where definitively you can make a difference. Because if you make a difference, you'll make a living. Making a living is a byproduct of making a difference. You make enough of a difference in people's lives, you'll get enough of what you need.
Amen. Amen. That's just great advice. Thank you. And I want to thank you for being here today. This has been, it's always spectacular when we get together, but this has been terrific. And for any of you watching, when Mike says reach out to him, he means that. And if any of you need speakers or somebody for a conference or somebody to help kick off a new hire program, this is a guy that can get your team, on the right page and motivated. So, and you can get him with Antarctic Mike without any trouble at all.
You won't get me confused with anybody else, I promise.
No, no, not at all. So I thank you, Mike. I thank everybody for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you the next one.